Hi, everyone. This is Mark Curran, the host of Cross-Examination on WSFI Catholic Radio, 88.5 FM, 750 AM. And we have a great show this week. Our guest, Micki Whitthoeft, and Patrick Kenneally is co-hosting with me this week. You all know Patrick Kenneally, the McHenry County State's Attorney. Micki Whitthoeft, the mom of Ashli Babbitt, who killed in the January 6th incident at the Capitol, and it was terrible what happened with her life. But her mom is so gracious in coming on the show, and just a great lady. And we're really, really looking forward to talking with her and just trying to get to the bottom of things, trying to get the truth. That's what this show is all about. Thank you very, very much for coming on, Micki. We're really grateful for you.
Thank you for having me.
We want to know a little bit about Ashli, but maybe just a little bit about your background. Where are you from?
I'm from San Diego. I lived in Virginia until I was an adult, and then I moved to San Diego. I've been there for 40 years now. I had my children and raised my children in the San Diego area. I have 5 children. Ashli is my only daughter and my oldest child. She was a United States Air Force veteran who served 4 tours of duty in the Middle East to come home and be shot down by her own government that refuses to answer any questions about it or provide a proper investigation 904 days later.
It's really tragic. So tell us about Ashli. You know, what was her story? Like you said, she was a soldier. She was an American. She was, I think that the left would say that she was, conservative, and that means terrible things, obviously, in today's world for those that run the media companies and the left in general.
Ashli was a unique person. She had a very open-minded, liberal way of living her life, but she was very much a Trump supporter. And she had, when she got out of the Air Force, her and her husband moved to San Diego and opened a small business. Lived in an idyllic beach town with, her dogs at Dog Beach, and her husband with, just a special life. Her and her husband were in Cabo on Christmas, and she decided she wanted to go hear President Trump speak.
There is a sea of nothing but red, white, and blue, patriots and Trump. And it was amazing to get to see the president talk. We are now walking down the inaugural path to the Capitol building. 3 million plus people. God bless America, patriots.
She went to go hear President Trump speak and came home in a box, and that's unacceptable. My daughter lived in service to this country, well versed in the use of force continuum. Michael Byrd absolutely murdered her without so much as a warning, and then it was not pressed on any questions. He declined an interview that day, and then he was whisked away for 9 months to live at Andrews Air Force Base at the expense of taxpayers' dollars in a luxury suite. And to this day, he continues to profit and move on. When people talk about American citizens not having the right to be there, well, they absolutely have a right to be at the United States Capitol. And Ashli fought very hard for her right to be there, and she fought hard for the rights of people to say that she shouldn't have been there. But the citizen that shouldn't have been there in his capacity was Michael Byrd. He had prior excessive use of force issues, and he also had left his loaded weapon in a public restroom. And any other police force, that would have been grounds for termination. But in the Capitol Police Force, it's grounds for promotion. And, until the Capitol Police Force murdered my daughter, I had no idea that they operated with complete impunity. They answer to no one. They have a strictly internal review system. And so you don't ever know anything's happened with the Capitol Police unless they want to tell you so.
So the listeners out there know Michael Byrd was the Capitol Police officer that shot your daughter, Ashli Babbitt, and you've got her name on your shirt. That's a beautiful shirt, Ashli, and then Babbitt spelled Babbitt. Michael Byrd had been with the Capitol Police, and you were talking about the investigation into his having shot your daughter and how that went down and how that transpired. And obviously you were very disappointed with all of that and how it went out. Can you tell us what it was about President Trump that your daughter liked? What happened in terms of her going there that day?
Ashli liked President Trump for probably the same reason a lot of Americans like him. He was a, straight talking man that wasn't entrenched in the political system owing everybody here in this city favors. And so he was able to govern for the American people, not be governed by the system. And I think that, DC has a way until I've been here almost a year now. We hold a vigil outside the DC jail. We go to the courthouses to observe the trials and support the families of the J6 community. We also, meet with congressional staffers, congressional members, and we sit in on hearings. But since being here in DC, you can understand the level of corruption. It's not just, your stray police officer that might be rogue in this town. It's really just one big organism that moves in one direction. And if you don't agree with them, they will swallow you up. Federal courthouse, I just cannot believe the violation of January 6th defendants' rights from the way they've been jailed and held in pretrial detention.
With regards to Ashli, though, so she went there. She had heard had she heard President Trump speak before?
She had been to a lot of Trump rallies and support boat parades and stuff in San Diego, but she had never actually seen him speak in person.
To President Trump sort of coming on the scene politically, would you describe Ashli as a political person? And sort of who did she, and were there other candidates that she supported? Was there a specific party that she was entrenched with?
No, not really, but she did live in service of this country. Ashli was 35 when she was killed. She was 17 when she committed to the Air Force and just lived her life in service of this country and loved this country more than any candidate that was put forward before. In Donald Trump, she had a special love for him because of just for the same reasons that a lot of Americans love Donald Trump. But, Ashli was politically aware of what was going on around her in her local surroundings and her local community in a way that I wasn't, because like I said, I was very apolitical. I was living my little happy housewife life, really not paying too much attention to what was going around me, like so many people today. And just, I don't know what it's going to take to wake Americans up. I relate to them because, like I said, until my horrific tragedy, I was just happy to go along with the status quo. And I think that that's where a lot of Americans were at. And until COVID came around and the lockdowns came down, and I think that people as a whole began to wake up to the fact that this government is very oppressive and very controlling. And, they had ways of making you can't go out to dinner. I guess that's no big deal. But then they closed down your churches and they closed down your schools and, and then you can't vote in person and you just take away your freedoms just, by the handfuls. And I think that, people on the average were just not as compliant as or compliant in the beginning, and then when it just started to stretch out, American people were just had enough of it because we watched COVID ruin family businesses and deteriorate our communities over the 2 years that it held us hostage.
California looked a lot different, let's say back in 2020, than it did when Ashli was growing up. Do you think sort of the changes that took place in California, both politically and culturally, and how things had maybe just looked so much different from when Ashli was a child, do you think that played a role in her political enlightenment as well as activism?
I think her political enlightenment and activism probably came from her time in the military, when she saw more of the inner workings of, the effects of this country's actions on other areas of the world and on this country itself. The policies that were put into place that were really anti-American, and she was very aware of some of the corruption that goes on in politics, and she felt like Trump was our guy to drain the swamp. I don't want to use that cliche, but it's too late. I already did. But he was here to clean house, and she loved that about him. And, I think that was her political take on it. And then we weren't watching the election together. I was lucky enough to raise my children and live in a little house for 24 years. And then my husband and myself moved onto a boat. So I was living on a boat in the San Diego harbor, and Ashli was right around the corner in Ocean Beach. And we were like texting back and forth the night of the election. And, she knew that at that moment, what had happened, because, we went to bed, Trump was winning, or people went to bed. We were up through the whole thing, but very much aware that the election had been stolen right in front of us. And, as over half of America, she was pissed, I was pissed. You're watching something that you think will never happen in this country happen right before your eyes. So that was an eye-opening experience for her as well.
A person named Ashli Babbitt was killed, and she shouldn't have been killed. And that thug that killed her, there was no reason to shoot her. At blank range, cold blank range, they shot her. And she was a good person. She was a patriot. There was no reason. And he went on television to brag about the fact that he killed her.
I think the reasons that you cited as to why your daughter liked President Trump, I think those are reasons we all like, Tim. I personally did as well. It was kind of the drain the swamp, as you said, in that deep state, as they're referred to. And did she see evidence of that in the military, where it seemed kind of like that to some extent there was still an old boys club in some of the career people that were around that, essentially they didn't always do the right thing. They kind of took orders from, other unelected people.
When you sign yourself over to the military, you kind of agree to follow people's orders that you may not always agree with.
What were her thoughts on the wars that we were in while she served?
It's not just a cut and dry answer for her. Ashli saw so many different sides of different things, but Ashli was not pro-war. Ashli was anti-war. And at some point, we all knew it was a bad decision for us to still be here. And you have to realize in that process, she was signing a blank check with her life. That's why, to me, it's so ironic that, Ashli was in harm's way so many times that there were days that I was really surprised not to get a phone call that something had happened to her. But, to go to a Trump rally and come home in a box, that's just unacceptable. And a lot of people don't know that there were 4 unarmed American citizens killed that day. Ashli was definitely the most public, but it's starting to be talked about now. Roseanne Boylan was beaten to death by Metropolitan Police Officer Leila Morris. And she was also promoted and taken to the Super Bowl. But that's on there's video proof of Roseanne Boylan being struck in the head repeatedly by Officer Leila Morris until the death blow is stricken on her head. I have been here in D.C. almost a year now. We held a vigil outside the D.C. jail and sing the national anthem on through live stream and a phone and a microphone with the men in the D.C. jail, because despite how this country has treated them, they still continue to sing the national anthem every night at 9:00. We're there to do it with them. It's just a surreal experience that this still goes on in this country, and I just feel so compelled to not let my daughter's death be for no reason. She was so full of life and so full of promise, and it's just not acceptable. Not only did they kill her, then they disparaged her reputation, and now it's just a cover up where nobody wants to answer for anything that went on that day. And I know, how many times do you see over 100 detainees in jail that are the ones going, release the footage, show us what we did that day? Because I know the Capitol Police absolutely did not de-escalate the situation. They waged war on American citizens, and the FBI had operatives on the ground that day to ensure that it was a rowdy, violent experience. And there were other agitators on the ground that day too. And it's not a question of if undercover FBI agents were on the ground. That came out in the Proud Boys trial. It's just a question of how many and what other agencies are going to admit to be in there, because we absolutely know they were there.
Did you have any premonition that Ashli was in any danger, that any of the people who were going to the rally were going to be put in danger? Were you worried at all? Was it akin to when Ashli was overseas? What were your thoughts when Ashli said, hey, look, I'm going to go there? Did you have any concern? Was there any sort of motherly fear?
Well, Ashli didn't tell me she was going to DC. We had talked on New Year's Eve, and she did not make mention of it. And she decided very much at the last minute that she was going. But that wasn't unlike Ashli. Ashli, when she decided she was going to do something, she did it. She didn't check with anybody or ask anybody's permission. And so I did not find out she was going to DC until she was already in DC. Because her and her husband had just come back from Cabo, and they did run a small business. And her husband was like, I don't think, we need to get back to work. And Ashli's like, I think this is going to be the last time I get to see President Trump speak, and I want to go see him speak. And, we didn't know at that time it's going to be the last time she heard anybody speak. And it's just so unacceptable unacceptable that, my daughter's the only one to ever be shot in the Capitol. And nobody has to answer for that. And that just blows my mind. And the fact that, Zach Alam broke that window that she went through.
Did she actually go through the window as Michael Byrd shot her? Can you take us through your best understanding as to what transpired in those moments?
There's a lot of question about the way the Capitol Police were behaving that day. There were 3 police officers standing outside the door, and Ashli was telling them to call for backup, and I could see that she was angry. Then I saw, Zach Alam breaking the window, and Ashli, her face went from anger to fear. And then she actually literally went down swinging, because after Zach Alam broke that window, she punched him in his face and then popped up in the window and didn't make it through the window.
Did she know him prior to January 6th?
No, and it's I believe he's a little Antifa, and I believe he was there to cause problems that day, and so he did. There, and we know that some of the people that came in as Jan 6ers, Josiah Kenyon and somebody else whose name escapes me right now, but they were in with the January 6th prisoners and have admitted to being Antifa, and Zach's not admitted such things, but I believe he was Antifa. I believe he was there to agitate. I don't really know that much more about him other than he broke the window.
Have you seen all these videos been released to the public where you're able to see what Ashli had done?
I've not seen the shooting or the death of my daughter. I've seen up to when she steps up into the window, and I have no, I've not seen it.
So the narrative that's put out by the media is that she's going through the window, not that somebody else broke it, and that she was upset as to that, and that she punches them, but it's simply that she's trying to enter into the speaker's area. So that's not accurate.
I would say that she stepped up into the window and then was blown away before she got through the window. She did not get through the window because Michael Byrd gave her no warning to stand down. He popped out from behind his cowardice position and shot her dead, and then ran the other way like a coward, while my daughter laid on the floor and bled out without so much as anybody coming to her aid. And when the man that was trying to help her was a medical doctor, he was picked up by the police, thrown down the hall, and has since been charged. So, the events of that day were very much, I believe people have questions to answer.
Kenneally, the McHenry County State's Attorney, myself, we're very familiar with deadly force, and deadly force can only be used when you're in threat of imminent deadly force or something of similar nature, and that this didn't present itself as a deadly force situation where he should have been able to use his gun.
Use of force experts say not. And like I said, he's never been pressed. And Lester Holt, with those softballs he threw him, was the first time he had been interviewed. But, Ashli was 5'3" tall on a high hair day and 115 pounds. So if Michael Byrd was scared of Ashli Babbitt, he was definitely in the wrong profession.
Like some of the things that you've reviewed and some of the things that you've learned is that Ashli was there and was trying to keep order. And by virtue of the fact that she's trying to shut down people who are causing, let's say, havoc and breaking windows and damaging property, why do you think she went inside the Capitol itself? What do you think sort of the purpose of that was?
I think I wish we could ask her, but instead of being detained and arrested, she was murdered. So I would really have no way of knowing that. I wish my daughter was here to ask her such questions.
So, Micki, you talked about the investigation into Michael Byrd, and who handled that investigation? Capitol Police themselves, or
I believe it was the Metropolitan Police, but I'm not sure. I don't believe there was ever any proper investigation. I know there was no crime scene roped off. There was no precautions taken in the crime scene. They mopped up my daughter like a piece of trash and went on with business.
You don't know how the investigation went down. You don't know who handled the investigation. All we know is that eventually he was cleared without any discipline and put back into the same position.
Actually, he's been promoted, and I believe the investigation was completed by the Capitol Police.
Is there somebody within Congress that's been helpful for you as the mother? Do we have any senators or Congress men or women that have been helpful in terms of helping you get answers?
Well, we have people that are pushing forward with looking for answers for the whole day. There were definitely people in positions of authority that did not handle, at the very least, did not handle the situation correctly. And I would say handled situations corruptly. But we had our first field hearing where they were talking about investigating, some of these people, Yolanda Pittman, Nancy Pelosi, and people that were in positions of authority that day. But I would say, Paul Gosar is an amazing support. Troy Nels has been supportive. Marjorie Taylor Greene's been instrumental in trying to, implement jail reform and improvements inside the jail.
I was there back in late 2021 when myself, along with Louis Gohmert, were the only ones to go into the jail and see the conditions that the pretrial January 6th defendants were being held in. And it was so horrific that we wrote a report called Unusually Cruel that's still on my congressional website today. The medical director in the jail showed off and bragged about all of her medical services and treatments that they can provide in the jail. But when we talked to the pretrial January 6th defendants, they told us they were receiving no medical treatments for problems and health problems that they have. Even one man in there with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. He has cancer and he doesn't get any treatment there.
Matt Gaetz is the one that called for the field hearing. Louis Gohmert, before he retired and left, was amazing.
For our listeners, once again, you're listening to WSFI Catholic Radio 88.5 FM and 750 AM WNDZ. I'm Mark Curran, the host of Cross Examination with Patrick Kenneally, my co-host, McHenry County State's Attorney. We're talking to Micki Whitthoeft, who's the mom of Ashli Babbitt, who was killed on January 6th. And some of the things that interest me so far as the investigation into Michael Byrd, the police officer that took her life, is one that the Capitol Police, to our knowledge, and I've done extensive search prior to conducting this interview of you, Micki, and it was hard to find out who did the investigation. You understand that Capitol Police did their own investigation. I could tell you as a longtime sheriff that's completely unacceptable. We don't investigate our own. There's too much of a conflict. And even if you don't believe that there's a conflict, that they could actually do an investigation into a deadly shooting, there's still always that appearance, which is why we've always used outside sources to conduct our investigations. And they didn't do that. They took it upon themselves to do it. I'm curious as to whether or not they'd run any drills as far as this scenario. We've run drills with regards to school shootings, and we've run drills with regards to every possible scenario that could come into Lake County, Illinois, our sheriff's office. So there was never like a first time, what are we supposed to do? Do you have any knowledge as to whether or not they had conducted such any drill like that in anticipation of this happening someday?
I don't know what the previous operations of the Capitol security system would be. I do know that, as you said, that they use other police forces use external review systems, and that's what we were talking about earlier, that the Capitol Police do not, is strictly internal review system. And also, just one more thing, that my daughter is the death people know mostly about, but there were four unarmed American citizens that died that day and very much deserve an investigation into their death. My daughter, Ashli Babbitt, was shot by Michael Leroy Byrd. Roseanne Boylan was beat to death by Metropolitan Police Officer Leila Morris. And Kevin Greason and Benjamin Phillips, official cause of death was a heart attack, but Kevin Greason was hit with a flashbang grenade that we believe induced that heart attack. And again, that we had nefarious actors that day, that there was a first line of aggression. We could talk about Ray Epps and the people that were there with Ray Epps.
Yeah, thank you, Micki, very much for clarifying that.
I was looking at the official press release from the United States Capitol Police, and it indicates that it was the Office of Professional Responsibility, or the OPR, that actually conducted the investigation. So that would be sort of an internal affairs unit within the Capitol Police. But I still think your point is well taken, which is this is not a completely independent agency. Rather, this is under the umbrella of the United States Capitol Police that is conducting an investigation into one of its own. And so I'm wondering, in your conversations with any of the representatives or otherwise, is there an effort maybe to refine the procedure by which these types of incidents are investigated by the Capitol Police and ensure that there is an independent agency that's coming in that has no ties that bind with the person who is under investigation?
Like I said, I've been in here in DC for almost a year now, and I've had that conversation with very many congressional staffers and members. So I don't know what is underway right now, but I would like to think that, as American citizens discover these facts, that the Capitol Police literally answer to no one, and they operate with impunity. They operate with impunity. They are not responsible for what they do and cannot be prosecuted for it. So I think that that's a very un-American way to do things, and the only police force in this country that is afforded that privilege. So I think that they take their orders from Congress, they answer to Congress, and they protect Congress. Like being here in DC, I've seen them. The Capitol Police, I know that there are good and bad everywhere, but overall, just not a together group. I was in front of the Supreme Court the other day, and for the first time since I've been in DC, I heard an evacuation of the Capitol. It was a drill, and it sounds like a fire drill, and then there's somebody over the loudspeaker going, evacuate, evacuate, evacuate. And I don't believe that the January 6th protesters were afforded that message before they were fired upon, because, like I said, there were the front line of agitators, Ray Epps, other FBI operatives, CIA, and whoever else was on the ground that day was the front line of agitators, and the police, when they decided to just without caution or care launch munitions into American citizens from above, because rubber bullets are not lethal force unless they're fired from above, and then they very much become deadly. The OC spray that sucks the oxygen out of the air very much becomes deadly. Flashbangs, when you are hit with them and they set you on fire, very much become deadly. So we watched that. The news puts on like people rushing the Capitol. Well, what was happening is there were flashbangs going off behind them, so they had to run somewhere because they were absolutely being hit and caught on fire. We had rubber bullets through cheeks and people down as a result of what the police were doing. And from the footage that I have seen enough of to know, and we do need the footage released. Marjorie Taylor Greene is now against that because she's scared sedition hunters is going to come after other American citizens. Well, they're coming after other American citizens anyway. I believe that the same evidence that would exonerate some of the people we have sitting in jail today, especially the men that were surrounding Roseanne Boylan and her death, and American citizens trying to provide her aid and make a hole for her. We still have people sitting in jail, a dozen men in jail that were around Roseanne Boylan. And these men are, their cases are being pushed back and pushed off. And it is to encourage a plea deal so that they don't ever have to expose the footage of what went on around Roseanne Boylan, not to actually have that footage shown in a courtroom where you can see police officers waging war on American people.
So you're in Washington, D.C. You've been praying. You've seen the people that are charged as a result of January 6th. You've been to their court hearings. You understand what's going on. So a lot of the people out there, especially in our listener audience, don't know what's happening to these people. Could you tell us a little bit about what's happening to these people and who these people are to some extent? And lastly, but maybe most importantly, what you're praying for, and how can our listeners out there pray as well?
Well, what's happening to these men is they are absolutely not being tried fairly. They're having duplicitous charges, excessive charges, and they go into a courtroom with judges that are predisposed to think that all Trump supporters are out of line, that there's no evidence of a stolen election, that people shouldn't have been there that day. If you so much as stepped on the grounds, you violated of everything that this country stands for. They very much judge the day on the calendar and not the man for their deeds. So, when people talk about blanket pardons, I think that is so, many people may want that. That's not something I don't think a blanket pardon is a good idea, because I think these men, if adjudicated fairly, would come out in the wash, what they did and what they didn't do. Blanket pardons, I don't think everybody on the grounds that day was a Boy Scout. We had some people behaving badly, a lot of police officers behaving badly, and I think that in the trials and stuff, if they would let all the evidence, the exculpatory evidence come out, that we would see some of the police officers behaving badly. But what I pray for is fair adjudication, because I don't think anybody has committed such a crime that they deserve 18 years in prison. We had older gentleman, Ed Vallejo, who was a member of the Oath Keepers, and he was not even in the city. He was across the river in Virginia, and he was convicted of seditious conspiracy. This man's in his 70s. He's going to die in jail, and I want to see things like that stop happening. But to just blanket pardon people and say nothing happened, a lot of people would like to see that. I would not. I would like to see people tried and judged by a fair jury. We sit in the voir dire process, the jury selection process, and every single juror in this city has been named as a victim. This entire city has been named as a victim. And I don't know how you can be expected to get a fair trial from a jury that has been named as a victim. We had Victoria White come and stay with us. She was going to take a plea deal. And then after staying in our home, she woke up the next day and decided not to take a plea deal. But in the process, she had gone to the halls of Congress with us and visited some congressional members. They wanted to revoke her pretrial release status because of that, because she had gone to the congressional halls and visited people that she perpetrated her crime against. So they absolutely named this city as a victim. And then they want to try the January 6th defendants in this city, and the people that live in this city are nobody's peers. This is like a twilight zone of its own. These citizens are different. These rules are different. These people are different. It's a very divided. It's people think racism is a problem in this country. It's not. It's elite. It's elitism. Either people belong to a set of people that have everything and have control in this city, or they belong to the other side who have nothing and have no control. And the pursuit of keeping their power is a very anti-American thing to watch.
You brought up the idea that you want sort of the evidence to see the light of day, and especially the evidence to see the light of day in a courtroom. You made reference to the individual who was the Oath Keeper who got 18 years. My understanding is he was convicted after a trial. So in your opinion, after having observed that, was there something wrong with the process there? Was not all the evidence being presented, especially exculpatory evidence? And what do you think the government and or defense attorneys can do better with respect to some of these trials coming up?
First of all, that was two different people. Ed Vallejo was a 74-year-old man that was convicted of seditious conspiracy and he wasn't even in the city. That is separate from Stuart Rhodes, who received 18 years for seditious conspiracy. He was an Oath Keeper. And I very much think that the evidence doesn't come out in these cases. And you want to start with the very first violation of somebody's constitutional right. They have a constitutional right to have an independent trial. In this city, it's like they have five men. They're trying 5 men in a courtroom at the same time because they may have been. The Oath Keepers were a group, but we have seen people tried together simply because they were snapped in the same photograph. Anything to make it easier for the full weight of the United States government to come down against you. And the Oath Keepers were tried 5 at a time. The Proud Boys were tried 5 at a time. And these men are very much, when they're in the courtroom, it's hard to put on a good defense for your defendant when you have to throw his buddy under the bus to do it. I believe absolutely they have a right to have their own trial, their own jury. The Oath Keepers, they had, over 20,000 Signal messages. I know you people think that your Signal, it's safer to be on Signal. Well, I don't really know what's safer about it. I think you can set your messages to delete or whatever, but I watched Signal messages of 20,000 Signal messages in the Oath Keepers trial that one jury.
What are you referring to with regards to Signal messages?
They present as evidence of seditious conspiracy that are back and forth between these men that are in the courtroom. And at one time. So you have one jury that has to sort out everybody's participation in that day, and they come in already predisposed to not to think everybody that was on the grounds that day was guilty, and they say so in the jury selection process. The first question is, do you have strong feelings about January 6th? And without fail, I have never seen a jury pool member say, no, I don't have strong feelings about it. Every single person in this city is named as a victim and feels like a victim as a result of January 6th. This is absolutely not a fair place to charge the men and women that were on the grounds that day. Some people never having seen violence. The west side and the east side of the Capitol were completely different situation. And every single person, including my daughter 2 hours up to her death, was proud, and it was a proud patriotic moment for people on the grounds until it wasn't. And I would suggest that it's because of FBI operatives breaking the line and agitating and coming after police, and police absolutely waging war on American citizens that day.
If you know, are defense attorneys bringing motions to change the venue from DC to other
every single one of them? Yes, that is the very first thing. The very first thing they ask for, and it is denied across the board.
So you're listening to WSFI Catholic Radio 88.5 FM and 750 AM WNDZ. Patrick Kenneally, McHenry County State's Attorney, myself, Mark Curran. Show is Cross-Examination. Micki Whitthoeft, who's the mom of Ashli Babbitt, and Ashli Babbitt was the veteran that was shot to death on January 6th. In that city for a while, Washington, D.C., and you're holding these prayer vigils. What specifically are you praying for? And how are these people being treated from incarceration on down different than a normal individual that's charged with a crime in America would be treated?
This is my first dealings with any criminal system. But, the DC jail itself, whether you're a January 6th defendant or not, is just not, it's like a third world jail. I know when we first got to DC, our men and women were denied visitation in any form. No, but this was strictly January 6th defendants. The rest of the jail had visitation, but our men had moldy, chemical-filled food. They're in jail cells with brown water and human excrement everywhere and other bodily fluids. They were locked down for 23 hours a day. And like I said, no video or in-person visitation for over 2 years until Troy Nels went in and facilitated visitation for them with their families, which they now have. And we have Operation Visitation, where we have a volunteer that tries to make sure everybody that wants a visit that day has a visit that day. So we're also, I've been in the jail to visit several of these people. And as far as what I pray for justice. I pray for recovery of this country. I pray for my daughter. I pray for justice for Ashli, for Roseanne, and for every single person that is sitting in there that has served this country. 70% of the men in there are veterans and have served this country in some way. Veterans, police officers. We've arrested teachers, people from all walks of life. You think, it's so easy to make a blanket statement, but these are people from all walks of life.
I agree with you, Micki, and I'll tell you something. I ran for U.S. Senate against Dick Durbin in Illinois, ran for Illinois Supreme Court as well. And the first question that I often received from the Chicago media was, do you believe that the election was stolen? And if you didn't answer that the way they wanted you to answer it, you were done. And almost to a T. And I had one media member, Bernie Tafoya for WBBM, chase me down for having said something negative about an individual and then commenting, you were a Trump supporter, which is far worse, blah, blah, blah. And he did this on a personal page of mine. But he's reflective of so many of these people that their visceral hatred for President Trump is so great that anybody that's associated with him in any way, shape, or form needs to be taken down. They need to be destroyed. They need to be silenced. And I saw it. I mean, whether you like President Trump or not, the media and they are in control, and they are a cabal to a large extent in this country. And you talk about conspiracies. That's the one that you see. So I want to ask, did Ashli believe that the election was the results were true, or did she think that there was a possibility that the election had been stolen, if you will?
Absolutely knew the election was stolen. We watched it happen.
40% of America would agree with what you just said. So that's a huge block. At least 40%. That's what the polling data shows. So let me just say this.
I think that's a low number. I think that our government has made people so afraid to speak up that I think that, with the evidence that has come out since then, maybe 40% believed it then, but I'm thinking it's more than that now. I think,
What I would say to you also is that I don't know. You know why I don't know if it's been stolen or not? Because we never had congressional hearings on it. We never had a real investigation into it. It was never presented in terms of allowed to go forward, even in state legislature signatures. We never did a deep dive into any of this. So there were huge questions that were raised. Maybe it was just, people voting that shouldn't have voted. There were irregularities. What those numbers add up to, we don't really know. And that's part of what the media has done, is to silence it and to prevent anybody from really taking up the cause, as far as, let's just give the American people confidence that it was a fair election. We can't do that because it never goes anywhere.
Well, what happens is anybody that suggests such a thing is they come after you with the full weight of the United States of America. And that's another thing that you don't even think about, how, a lot of these men have no criminal history. Ashli had no criminal history. But a lot of these people are coming into this with no criminal history. And you walk into these courtrooms and it is, the United States government versus, whatever the defendant's name is. And when they say the United States government versus, they mean the United States government and all the full weight and might of the United States government. I've seen, untruths told in the courtrooms by, FBI and police officers on the stage. Officer Ganell, Officer Fanone, those are two of the names that they testify in a lot of these trials. And I've seen them lie. I've seen, but the bar was set so low. I mean, the halls of Congress, when I first got to D.C., you couldn't get in because it was shut down because of COVID. The Democrats were still running it. But now that the Republicans have control of it, it's back to the way it was, where you can just go in and knock on your congressional members' doors.
Speaker McCarthy will have hearings into January 6th, or is it done?
Speaker McCarthy, I did meet with Speaker McCarthy. He made that really flippant comment where a reporter asked him if because Marjorie Taylor Greene, I had been in a committee hearing, and Marjorie Taylor Greene saw me, and she talked about Ashli's murder. And then some reporter asked McCarthy if he thought Ashli was murdered, or if the police officer was just doing his job. And McCarthy said the police officer was just doing his job. And I could tell by the way he said it that he hadn't seen it. So he did take a meeting with me. I did have to go by myself. I thought I was going to have the support of Ivan Raiklin and Dave Summerall, but at the last minute, they told me I had to come by myself. So we did talk about that. And to my surprise, McCarthy told me that he had not watched it. So, we had the conversation of how can you say such a thing and have an opinion on what happened when you haven't seen it. So he promised me that he would watch it. I don't know if he has or not, because I've not heard from him, but we have had some contact with some of his staff members that, are interested in moving forward and looking at some things. My hope lays with, and I can't believe I didn't mention him earlier when we were talking about congressional members that are supportive, is Barry Loudermilk. I believe Barry Loudermilk is going to be instrumental in pushing an investigation forward, and he gives me hope, as well as
I know that Ted Cruz was hoping to be able to take up hearings on the steal, if you want to call it a steal, or the irregularities of the election.
What does it say to the nearly half the country that believes this election was rigged if we vote not even to consider the claims of illegality and fraud in this election? Clear, I am not arguing for setting aside the result of this election. All of us are faced with two choices, both of which are lousy. One choice is vote against the objection. And tens of millions of Americans will see a vote against the objection as a statement that voter fraud doesn't matter, isn't real, and shouldn't be taken seriously. Most, if not all of us, believe we should not set aside the results of an election just because our candidate may not have prevailed. And so I endeavored to look for door number 3, a third option, and for that I looked to history, to the precedent of the 1876 election, the Hayes-Tilden election, where this Congress appointed an electoral commission to examine claims of voter fraud. 5 House members, 5 senators, 5 Supreme Court justices examined the evidence and rendered a judgment. And what I would urge of this body is that we do the same, that we appoint an electoral commission to conduct a 10-day emergency audit, consider the evidence, and resolve the claims. For those on the Democratic aisle who say there is no evidence, they've been rejected, then you should rest in comfort. If that's the case, an electoral commission would reject those claims. simply telling the voters, go jump in a lake, the fact that you have deep concerns is of no moment to us. That jeopardizes, I believe, the legitimacy of this and subsequent elections. The framers knew what they were doing when they gave responsibilities to Congress. We have a responsibility, and I would urge that we follow the precedent of 1877. The Electoral Count Act explicitly allows objections such as this one for votes that were not regularly given. And let me be clear, this objection is for the state of Arizona, but it is broader than that. It is an objection for all 6 of the contested states to have a credible, objective, impartial body hear the evidence and make a conclusive determination. That would benefit both sides. That would improve legitimacy of this election.
I mean, like in terms of congressional hearings, to me, it's always just sort of felt like we're burying the lead. And you have sort of talked about how many of the people from January 6 who are in custody, they're facing sort of the full weight and this prodigious force of the American government sort of coming down on them. And I've always, I agree with that, but it always just seems like such a juxtaposition between that and all of the power, all of the might, all of the resources of the U.S. government. And yet they can't even secure the Capitol. So like if you look at what happened on January 6th, I was gobsmacked. I was astonished at the fact that there just was not enough people there from the Capitol Police and just how incompetent their crowd control was, especially knowing that there were going to be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people descending on the Capitol, many of whom sort of believed, whether it's true or not, believed that this election had been stolen. And so if you have all of these people who believe the election is stolen, everything is at stake. Everything is at stake and people are willing to do almost anything. And yet it was just so clear that there were not enough people there to keep the crowd under control. And if there's not enough people there, well, now you're creating a desperate situation where deadly force, panic, fear, all of that stuff is going to take place. And so I'm wondering, has there been any discussion? And then even after that, the Capitol Police has been sort of heralded by the national press and otherwise as having performed heroically, diligently, and competently on January 6th. Has there been any talk about holding them accountable as an entire institution for what I think is objectively and self-evidently really a poor job on January 6th, keeping that crowd under control and having the resources that was necessary to protect a fundamental American institution?
Well, not only could they not keep the crowd under control, they couldn't keep themselves under control. The Capitol Police ran around behaving terribly that day, and they were very confused. The leadership was poor. And what isn't talked about, I believe what isn't talked about is not enough, are the bomb threats at the RNC and the DNC, which thinned out the Capitol Police force and then resulted very much in the need for the Metropolitan Police Force to come in. But I think that the Capitol Police not only didn't keep the crowd under control, they didn't keep themselves under control. And even after things were getting a little hectic at the Capitol, there were Capitol Police that did not redirect the crowd. They continued to let seas of people come towards the Capitol without even suggesting they turn around. And we can talk all day about who opened the doors and why the doors were open. And some of the Capitol Police welcoming people inside and some of them not. So, that's exactly why we need an investigation. That's exactly why the American people calling for the 44,000 hours of footage have a right to see it. But, you notice it's the January 6th defendants that want to see it and the people in power that don't want it seen. And that should tell you everything you need to know about why we can't see those tapes, why we can't see that footage, why we can't see that, because they know they're guilty and they know it would show them being guilty. They know the Capitol Police absolutely know it would show arrestable behavior by their officers that day, and we can't see it.
Historically, there was no criminal police as far as the federal government. Historically, the federal government was not really involved in criminal law at all, other than the acts of treason. What happened, the Commerce Clause was used to give the federal government those powers. The FBI was created. The first director of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, blackmailed a number of people, illegally wiretapped them, went after political enemies, and protected his job from one president to the next by keeping himself in power by illegally blackmailing elected officials. Similarly, other agencies, you go back to the IRS, and there was the Treasury Department that was used to get Al Capone because they didn't have a federal criminal statute that applied. So through the Commerce Clause, we created these RICO laws, which as a result of that, all these conspiracy statutes where you can go after groups of people and allocate and attribute the behavior of one to all. And the problem is, I see it with the federal government when it is involved in the criminal law business to some extent, is the fact that they aren't accountable. And that's what President Trump, why he resonated with so many people. He talked about the fact that there was a deep state and that these people are going to stay in power from one president to the next because they're not elected. And then, unless they're appointed to the top spot, you really can't get rid of them, and they'll survive forever. And they have little in terms of accountability to the American citizens. The federal government, the FBI, for example, the Justice Department, they don't have to prosecute anything. And unless they like the case, they don't take it. Patrick Kenneally is an elected state official, state's attorney. He essentially, crimes committed in McHenry County, and he doesn't take it, there's going to be hell to raise. So he has to answer on essentially every crime, whereas they don't. They pick and choose. They cherry pick what they want to do. We know that criminal defense lawyers that have represented people historically in front of the Justice Department, they wound up being had visits from the IRS that coincidentally would happen at the same time, and on and on. And so a lot of people are afraid of the federal government. They're afraid of the federal criminal justice system, and rightfully so. So are you finding that there's very few people that want to step up and say anything because they're afraid of their own backside, if you will?
Yeah, we've had some FBI whistleblowers coming forth, and Tariq Johnson from the Capitol Police has been speaking out recently. But no, absolutely, this like I said, when they say the full weight of the United States government, they mean that. They mean the IRS, the FBI, the CIA, the prosecutors, the judges, the congressional members. If they want you in this city, they're going to get you. And and then create a narrative and set about proving that, which I see time and time again. And we talked a little bit earlier about Matthew Graves, who is the one who decides whether to prosecute cases or not. And he wants to prosecute every MAGA granny he can get his hands on for walking on the grass on January 6th and have people sitting in jail for, 6 months before they see the light of day, or, like we still have people that haven't been in front of a judge yet. And so, but he doesn't, Matthew Graves, the same one that prosecutes and holds January 6th defendants to the wall and then some, he refuses, it declines to prosecute 67% of violent crimes in this city. 67% of the violent crimes in this city go unfiled and unprosecuted. And we're talking about, that there are rapes and murders in this city every day, carjackings every day. And these are things that don't get prosecuted while he continues. Like I said, 12 people were arrested last week, and they plan on arresting 1,000 more this year. They've hired 100 new prosecutors to do so, while other crimes in this city go untried, unprosecuted, unanswered for. We also had congressional members testify to the fact that there is no area of this city they consider unsafe. So, you can very much know that again, it's like they're living in a different world. There's no area of this city that's unsafe. That is just completely such a arrogant thing to say. I mean, there are probably areas of every city that are unsafe, and this one being no different. But they live in such an elitist lifestyle. These are people you're talking about. They pull up to their secure buildings and go in their underground garages and take an elevator up to their penthouse or wherever the hell they live. But they're not living the life of an average American DC citizen, because there are many areas of this city that are unsafe.
If you could talk a little bit about how God has given you grace to get through, your daughter, the American hero soldier, being shot on that day.
Well, I have my good days and I have my bad days, but I am very much here because, when I was able to sleep long enough to dream, my daughter did come to me in a dream and tell me that, these are the people that she says, I'm a goner, Mom, but these are the people you need to worry about. And of course, that is a dream. But in my heart, I know that my daughter would be here if she hadn't been killed that day. She'd very much be advocating for these people. And I was told by a good friend of mine to go home and pray about my path forward. And I did. And that led me here to DC. And I have been supported and just encouraged the whole way. And I do meet people. It is such a strange, I had such a small circle in my life, before all this happened. And I people have such a strong opinion of me now. Either they hate me or they love me. And it's just odd to have people that you don't know have such strong feelings about you. But when I meet people and they tell me that they're praying for me, I absolutely know they are. And I can feel it.
What is your vision of justice?
Well, my vision of justice would be to have the people that murdered my daughter answer for that, and to have these men and women whose lives have been utterly destroyed, not just their lives, but their families' lives. The tentacles of this reach so deep. You have mothers without their sons, children without their fathers, wives without their husbands, husbands without their wives. And the tentacles of this reach further than the mere, people that are in jail. It's just so, my own family has been touched in ways I can't even articulate. And I would like to see their lives restored to them. I would like to see, I don't like we talked about a blanket pardon. I just want to see men judged for their behavior that day and judged in a fair way, and not in this city that hates them for being Trump supporters when they come in the door and hates them more after they bury them under the jail. So I think we absolutely need a change of venue to make sure that happens. And I pray for that every day. And I just want, the fatherless children, and I see the heartache in people's faces when they go into that courtroom and they know what's going to happen, and then it does. So I would pray for justice.
Seeing any courage in the media? We saw what happened with Tucker Carlson releasing the videotapes that nobody had seen before, and shortly thereafter he's let go by Fox, and he's essentially reduced to being on Twitter and silenced. He was somebody that at least gave us a forum to have these conversations. Are there people out there that you see hope in as far as the media that we can look to do something?
I think independent media is our way of the future. I think, shows like the one you're doing now and podcasts from grassroots people. And actually, a group of people I've become increasingly familiar with is our live streamers, our boots on ground people that here is a camera, it's on the situation, and you see what happens with your own eyes. I think that is going to be the way of the future. Now that everybody has a cell phone and a camera on the end of it, we can all be independent reporters. And I think that, we do need a platform where more people can, focus on where to see that work. But I think that independent journalism is the way to go, because these private agencies absolutely own people and tell them what to say.
I would like to close in prayer, but before we do that, I'd like to have any final thoughts from you, Micki, and any final thoughts from Pat, just what's important to know.
Well, what's important to know is don't be sad for Ashli Babbitt, be brave for her. And also take action. We the people, be the people, stand up and do something. Everything can't be your fight, but you can do something to further your community. And it does start locally. So I would say, I know everybody can't be in here in DC, but you can do something locally. You can speak up, you can stand up, and you can be a strong American voice. And don't be afraid of what your neighbor thinks of you, because they may be thinking the same thing.
Just wanted to say that I'm so sorry for your profound loss. I really am.
Thank you.
So let's go to Our Lady in prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women. Blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. I think we call upon the intercession of St. Michael. I see Ashli Babbitt as St. Michael on earth for us, somebody that had great courage, 4 tours of duty, as her mom said. We'd ask that St. Michael protect Micki, her mom, and that we pray for her soul as we pray for the souls of all those that have gone before us. And we give great thanks to you, Lord, as well for Micki in her fight and what she's doing to try to essentially just put it out there so that people know more, and whether you agree with her or disagree with her, these are her opinions, not necessarily those of the radio station, but they're important to be heard. I mean, the world we're living in right now, the media wants to silence us and the government wants to silence